Hi everyone, it's Katie from Chords Records. It's a big day in my world. Brandi Carlile has released a new single and has announced a new album coming out October 24th, 2025. Very exciting for Brandi Carlile fans and their super fans called the Bramley. I absolutely love Brandi Carlile. I've been following her for years. I've seen her live several times in America, Red Rocks, The Gorge, Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm a completist. So I'll insert here sort of my collection. So I have the kind of full suite of all her albums, or their albums, because it's actually a band, Brandi Carlile, Tim and Phil Hanseroth. That's the core band. Have every version of every album and every guest appearance on vinyl. And then I've got a massive CD collection, which includes, of course, every version on CD, but also all the live radio station releases and bits and pieces like that. I've got a lacquer, I have test pressings, I'm all in. So this is really, really exciting. And what's really special about this particular release, and it's kind of indicative by the name, it sounds like she's returning to her roots. She's gone off on a bit of a tangent over the last few years. Her last album was about 4 years ago, in these silent days. And she started getting into this glam rock kind of pop vibe that she loves, you know, the kind of the David Bowie-esque, Elton John-esque. And of course then she released earlier this year her album Who Believes in Angels, her collaboration with Elton John, which, you know, got to number one in UK. It was a fantastic release for both of them. The promotion around it was intense, very different from her solo work with the Twins. And so what's happened now with this new album, and what's really exciting, is she has moved to a new label, Interscope Records, which is obviously part of Universal, the mothership, which is what Who Believes in Angels was released on. And of course the subsidiary of Interscope Records, Lost Highway. Lost Highway Records started in 2001, and they released that phenomenal soundtrack, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and that to date has been their biggest selling by far album. They released all those incredible Johnny Cash, the Johnny Cash albums on Interscope, the ones that were produced by Rick Rubin, and they sort of folded, and then they've come back this sort of very recently, and their roster includes people like Ryan Adams, Casey Musgraves, I think, and one Ringo Starr. So that's the logo there. And what's interesting about this record is it's in that black and white vein that this new album that Brandi Carlile has announced is. It's very stylistic, I would say. So very exciting. So she's with a new label, or labels, Interscope and Lost Highway. It's been produced by herself, Andrew Watt, who's worked with a huge amount of people, including Lady Gaga and a bunch of rock stars. But Who Believes in Angels, he produced that. But they were joined by Adam Dessner from The National, who's produced Taylor Swift, and Gracie Abrams, I think. Justin Vernon, Bon Iver, is producing some of the tracks, and he's actually playing on a lot more tracks than he's produced, including this latest single. So the latest single, the title track, has producers Adam Dessner, Andrew Watt, Brandi Carlile, but they all play instruments on it, whether it's electric guitars, synth, pedal steel. Justin Vernon, I think, is playing pedal steel. Like, absolutely phenomenal. On this particular track, Tim and Phil Hansroth aren't on the credits, so they haven't co-written and they're not playing anything. Brandi has said in a fan forum that they're not singers on this album, but they're very much part of the fabric and soul of what the Brandi Carlile kind of art firm is. They're a family, essentially, and they have contributed writing and playing on the album somewhere. We just don't know. Also on the album, there's a song called Joni. It's such an interesting concept for Brandi Carlile because she has gone off on these tangents, playing with Joni Mitchell and supporting her and kind of bringing her back to this life force that Joni is. She's gone off with Elton and now she's kind of returning to these roots, but she's doing it in a different way. She is sort of folk Americana. However, this first song, and by the sound of the producers that she's brought on, it feels like she's turning a little bit away from Americana, in fact, maybe, and moving towards that very much moody, indie, independent style of music. She is sort of unique, really, with that. But even just with this first song, you can hear towards in the back half of it the synths and electric guitar of Andrew Watt and Aaron Dessner. You can hear there's a difference at Aaron Dessner. You can hear the kind of influence of all that, and it is quite different. It's not Americana. So she's coming back, but in a little bit of a different way. And I think she's probably been a little bit, not influenced as such, but inspired by the new wave of younger female artists, sort of like a Boy Genius, a Lucy Dacus, kind of that atmospheric, beautiful sound. She did produce a young artist called Tish Melton, so a young teenage who's produced her first EP about a year or so ago, and that EP is actually quite beautiful, and you can hear this kind of gorgeous atmospheric modern young sound that's been emerging over the last 3 or 4 years, which I absolutely love. All these fantastic female artists, and my feeling is that she potentially has been inspired by it, and she in a sort of a sad way almost. Probably she's now in her 40s. Her time, she was too early for her time. Imagine if she'd been a young Brandi Carlile coming out now and singing now in this kind of era when the world is accepting independent singer-songwriters and brilliant female artists who are touring the world. So anyway, I'm probably going on a bit of a rant there, but I just find it fascinating. And one really, I think, quite an evident statement that I've read about her. Oh, I think it might have been, this might be attributed to her. She might have said this, is that she's always been very influenced by Emmylou Harris's Wrecking Ball album. That was such a kind of left pivot, a kind of a left turn in Emmylou Harris's kind of long career. And that album, produced by Daniel Lanois, was such a right-hand or a left-hand turn for her music, and it was such a stunning masterpiece of an album, and in many ways also kind of very atmospheric and beautiful sounds. And I have a feeling this is her album. This is her Wrecking Ball. I hope it is. I can't wait to hear the rest of the album. And just to show you a couple of, sort of fun bits and pieces, this is a very, very early EP of Brandi Carlile's from the year 2000. So we're talking a quarter of a century ago, one of her very first EPs that she used to hand out at gigs, called Room for Me. And it's just fun that it's got that similar return to myself kind of a nod to it. Also black and white cover. This was another very early self-release album from her when she was known as a band, We're Growing Up. How ironic. Also about a quarter of a century old. And this was from her last album, In These Silent Days, but the alternative cover. And you can see kind of similarities in that she obviously appreciates the art of the black and white photography. And you can also sense a little bit of Patti Smith horses in that photograph. And I should mention the photographer. Oh my goodness. The photographer of this album cover, Collier Shaw. She's beautiful imagery, black and white photography, and you can find her on Instagram. I might pop a link. I'll pop a link to all this stuff in the description. It's absolutely stunning and the photos that have been shown of this album so far is quite beautiful. And I should also call out the beautiful video that's been released, also done in black and white, by the filmmaker Floria Sigismondi, an Italian-Canadian who has done all sorts of music videos from David Bowie, to a whole bunch of different people. But she also did the biopic, or the movie, based on, she wrote the screenplay of The Runaways around about 15 years ago, 2010, I think it was. Great movie about really the relationship with the two, the lead women in The Runaways, the 70s rock group. So if you love that film, this film clip is, of the new single, is by her. So a cast of amazing people. And the last thing I would like to say is that she's Brandi Carlile is now, she left her management firm about a year or so ago. She's now managed by Catherine Carlile, her wife, not unlike the kind of Elton John managed by David Furnish, but also co-managed by the Sandbox Entertainment. And on that roster is Billie Eilish and Phineas and Casey Musgrave. So it's a fantastic collective of women. Very excited. I think this is going to be Brandi Carlile's Wrecking Ball album. I'm hoping it is. You can pre-order it at her website. I'll put all the details below. I hope you've enjoyed this quick little look at the new album, Returning to Myself by Brandi Carlile. I'll see you in the next video.